Hello, everyone, and welcome to the New Author Podcast. Today is Saturday, January 20th, 2024. This is episode number 251, and I am one of the hosts of this podcast, Jerry Evanoff. With me, as he is each week, is Rich Kacy. Rich, how are you?
I am doing great. I've been so happy this week. My internet has been so fast, I could almost weep sometimes. It was, uh,
Wow,
if,
that's
in fact, every now and then I just look at the internet speed test just to see those big numbers on it. I can't believe
that's
it took.
either.
Well, it's probably the router has helped, the new router, but I can't believe I waited this long to get a long Ethernet cable just to connect directly to the router.
Well, that joy in your eyes is either the speed of the internet, which you really do enjoy, or it's the fact that you were without it for like a week and a half, and the honeymoon period is still there of having it.
Yeah, I think that's partly it too. But now when I go off my desktop here and I go over and use the laptop, I can't stand it because it's loading so slow over the
Oh,
wireless
geez.
compared to the Ethernet cable.
Yeah, I know at work, I quit using the wired. I unplugged it from this hub that we have and just told them, all right, I'm sorry, I quit using the wireless and just plugged it into the hub and just said I'm using wired from now on because the wireless is just slower.
Right.
Also, it tends to like lose the connection, like just even like a blip. And if you're logged into stuff, it immediately just logs you out. So yeah,
Right,
wireless
right,
is
right.
always the way to go.
Yeah.
So all right, jumping into my stats for this past week. Inheriting Murder, book 2 in the Murder Mystery series. I remember last week when I did this update, I said I got like 150 words, and I felt like my words were getting better, and that's why I only had 150 words. Well, that all went out the window because this week I had 2,156 words added, and I'm now up to 76,528. I'm going to talk a little bit at the end of the podcast in the stuff to share section on why I'm adding more words, and I actually want to get your opinion on a few things that I want to kind of rant about when we
Okay.
get to that section. So
Okay.
Mailer Lite hanging tight at 1,080. Haven't really done much there. Facebook hanging steady at 220. Have done some posting there. It's about every other day right now, and it's funny because I'll sign on to Facebook one morning and I'll get an alert from Facebook and a notification, and it'll say, hey, your reach has lessened. You should probably post every day, and it's like, well, that's what I've been told, and it's just coming up with content is tough. I feel like I've been trying to do what you mentioned a couple weeks ago, do the Snapchat thing. I put that video up on yesterday, and a couple of videos, pictures I took earlier this week, I put up there. So I'm trying to mix that in, but there are sometimes when things on Snapchat just don't make any sense on Facebook, so I just don't do it.
Right,
But
right.
I did. I don't know if I've talked to you about this at all, but do you know the fascination around the Stanley Cup and not the hockey trophy?
I've seen it, but I've purposefully avoided trying to research what was going on. I'd say this is about a big coffee cup and it's stupid, so I didn't even look at it.
It is so stupid, and it looks like Cabbage Patch Kids days of Black Friday back in the 80s, because the Target had a Valentine's Day edition, a Starbucks Valentine's Day edition of the Stanley Cup, and they only had so many people were waiting out overnight, waiting for the place to unlock. And then when they went in again, running towards it, fighting, all the things that you saw with the Cabbage Patch Kids. I don't get it. It's a thermos. I have so many thermoses in my cupboard that I'm begging my job to stop giving away thermoses as prizes,
Right,
because it's
right.
such a stupid gift. And this cup, it's a so anyway. What I did I don't know if you saw this or not, but I think it was Wednesday. I made a book brush image of the actual hockey Stanley Cup on one side of the screen, and then a book brush image of someone holding my book on the left side. And I said something like, "Hey, you should get this. You'll have a hall of a time. Get it? Hall, like Bobby Hall, Brett
Yeah.
Hall, right?" I put that up there, and like I think the only person that gave me anything was my buddy Brian, who's a hockey fan. I feel like the people who got it either didn't know what the Stanley Cup thing was doing, or didn't get the joke, or just they never saw it. But I thought that was kind of funny. I did it on Instagram and got some likes there too, so I was pretty happy about that.
Yeah, in order to get that joke, you either have to live along the 100-mile border with Canada, uh, or something to even know who Bobby Hall was. Probably.
Right.
I mean,
Well,
because even
and Brett Hall was his son. He played for the
true,
Blues, St. Louis
that's
Blues.
true. That's
Yeah.
true. Um, yeah, you'd probably be more likely to get somebody to recognize Ovchenko or somebody like that than
Well,
Bobby
I
Hall.
did get creative on Facebook. I mean, on Instagram, I said I don't know how, HOWE, you could pass up on this, Gordie Howe. And then on Twitter, I did it again and I wrote something like, do this or ORR. You're going to have a bad time, something like that. So I feel
That's
like I,
great.
I
No,
was
I like that. I like that.
I was really looking into the hockey puns. I was trying to figure out what rhymed with Ovechkin, but I
Yeah.
couldn't really come up with anything.
Yeah.
So yeah. And then my goal for last week was just continue through the editing and get through chapter 20, which I did. I actually got through chapter 21. So we'll call that a success.
Yeah, it sounds good. My week was, in terms of stats, was yin and yang. On the yin side, I wrote exclusively on what the cat dragged in this week, and I actually had 11,703 words to the story in just under 9 hours of writing time. And I also did some editing during that time period too. So word count was fairly good. It was up, around 1,400 per hour while I was in the seat. That story currently sits at 23,482 words. Unfortunately, and the yang to this is that my schedule called for over 20 hours of writing time. So I really failed miserably from that perspective. And I'm going to cut myself some slack. I'll grab myself as a C this week, knowing that I'm going to have to kind of ease into getting used to writing to a schedule. We'll see how it goes this coming week. But I did get something accomplished, which was good. And story's moving along. And then, so I think the outline that I worked on that I'll talk about helped a lot in pushing me forward. So yeah, it was a pretty good week.
Great. I mean, 11,700 words is great, even though you planned for more, but
Right.
that's still a lot of words. I mean, I'm pretty happy about that.
And I'm not really planning for words. I don't really have word targets for the week. Well, I take that back. I do. I have word targets for the month so that you can break them down to the week. But what I'm really aiming at is trying to keep my butt in the chair for, basically half time during the week,
Right.
half-time job. And I kind of failed miserably at that this week for reasons, as there's always reasons. I just have to
There's always
find, I have to find my way around those reasons going forward.
All right. So looking back again to last week, at the end of the podcast, I talked about wanting to potentially take a vacation to celebrate my getting through step 3 of the baby steps plan, the snowball plan from Dave Ramsey. And so that's going to happen on January 31st. So in 11 days. And then step 4, which is basically just pushing my 401k, my work contribution from 6% up to 15%. And then step 5, I'm going to skip because I don't have kids. It has to do with saving money for kids' college, which would take me to step 6. So I wanted to try to do some kind of a celebration between, step 5 basically and step 6. And I was looking at Vegas plans, and I had mentioned to you last week, I'm just going to wait until Wednesday because that's the best time for flights. Well, Sunday morning, I woke up around 7:30 to this just horrible, yucky, blowing snow that we've really had for about the last week and a half up here. And it was cold out. I feel like that was the start of the days where it was single digits, throughout the evening and then in the morning, and then it would get into double digits during the day. And I, instead of going to Panera, which I was going to do, I instead sat for about 2 hours and I made a complete trip and paid for a complete trip to Vegas. It's all taken care of. I couldn't be happier. I'm looking forward to it.
The best thing is to lock that in by paying for it. That way you can't, well, you can back out, but it's going to be difficult to do.
It's going to cost more money to back out.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right.
Actually, kind of what led to it was, I was just up there looking. I wasn't planning on booking anything, but something I hadn't seen before was a nonstop from Cleveland to Las Vegas flight, which they used to have those in the other airlines besides Spirit and Frontier. And I don't really want to fly those anymore. They're not very good airlines. I actually found a United one, but it wasn't, whenever I go to Vegas, I always go Wednesday night to Sunday. That's how I do it. I leave Wednesday night after work. And then I come home on Sunday. Sometimes I'll go Wednesday during the day. So that's 3 vacation days. If I can get Wednesday night, I'll go 2. But without those nonstop flights, it's hard to get a Wednesday night flight. Well, I found the Thursday night flight and I looked at, I could actually do Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And it cost me about $525. Not, it's pretty average for what I pay for a flight to Vegas. But one of the flights is nonstop, which is amazing. And then I kept getting emails, and I get these emails about every quarter from all the MGM casinos, offering me 4 nights and or 3 nights comped or 4 nights comped. In the case of the 4 nights, it's always the hotels down on the south end of the strip, MGM, Mandalay Bay, Luxor, Excalibur, sometimes New York, sometimes Park MGM. But the issue was finding 4 days in a row that took advantage of weekends where every night was comped. So I looked around and there was a weekend, March 7th through March 11th, which is a Thursday through Monday, where in all those casinos, all 4 nights were comp. So I didn't know where to stay. Last time I stayed at Luxor, I wasn't real happy with it. I used to love that place. I just wasn't real happy with it. It needs a renovation pretty bad. It's got some really good restaurants though. They have a cafe called the Pyramid Cafe that I love, and they have a upstairs Mexican place called, it used to be called Tacos and Tequila. I think it's Diablo now, that I really like. So I wanted to stay around Luxor. So that threw the MGM out because it was across the street. And that was down to basically Mandalay Bay, which only 3 nights at Mandalay Bay were comp. The 4th was $82, and then Luxor and Excalibur. I started getting on the internet, and I looked up the beautiful thing about YouTube. I looked up all of the rooms that were being offered to me comped from all those casinos. And when it came down to it, I made a decision on a hotel based on a thing that when I tell people that, hey, I'm going to Vegas and this is why I picked this hotel, they kind of laugh at me. And I made the decision based on the fact that the Mandalay Bay room had a desk in it.
Oh, no, I can see that. Oh, definitely.
None of the other ones had a desk. They had seating areas, but no desk.
Yeah.
I'm glad you see that, because everybody else laughed at me.
Yeah.
Because I want to try to stick to my writing schedule. My writing schedule starts March 4th. This is March 7th. And I want to try to stick to that schedule. So I picked Mandalay Bay. It's funny. It was 3 nights comped. The 4th night was $82. This is over the weekend. So the 4th night was $82. I think that was Saturday night. I got $100 in resort credit and $50 in slot play. So it worked out well. And then once you added in the resort fee, the taxes, the booking fees, and like the cost of everything, I ended up paying like $274.
Yeah,
with
it's cheap.
3 comp nights. But it's so funny that it's 3 comp nights and it's $82 for one night, and it ends up being $274. It's just the resort fees there are outrageous. So
yeah, they really are.
Yeah, it was great. So the flight was, like I said, $525 to $550, and then the whole thing's going to cost about $800 to $850. In terms of my financial plan, like I said, January 31st, step 3 is finished, and then I'll go in and take care of step 4 at some point during the month of February. And then I'll basically, what I'll do is I'll use my February paychecks to save money for Vegas, and I'll be able to save a pretty good amount for Vegas. And then March 1st, I'll use some of that money. And then when I get home, everything's paid for, and then I just start paying off my house. I start step 6 with March 15th paycheck, and it all works out really well. So I'm very excited about that.
I like this little phrase that I've seen here that we could excerpt for the title of the podcast. Use my February paycheck for gambling. And just leave it at that.
That's brilliant. I'm gonna do that. Hold on, where's that at? So I can, there it is. So I can boldface. Use my February. I like that. Okay, I'm gonna boldface that so I remember. That's good. So like I said, I took a couple hours to plan this trip, and plus it was just yucky outside. I didn't want to go anywhere. So Panera is now out of the question. Around 10, I finally took a shower and just didn't really know what to do. I looked at the thermometer and it said 8 degrees. This is like 10:30 in the morning. It said 8 degrees. So I actually didn't do anything. I didn't go anywhere. I tried. I'm going to say tried. Even though I wrote in the outline, I did do chapter 18. Let's just say I tried to do chapter 18. I sat there watching football at the same time as I read through it, and I did all the story grid stuff, and it was fine. It took me about 3 hours to do because I was watching football at the same time. Let's see. I had some bets going. You know, it's hard to edit when you're really paying attention to football.
Right.
And I kind of, okay. So this whole layout that I'm doing where I'm plotting books 3 through 8 has really kind of been fun in the way, I think I said this last week. Feel like I'm plotting a television show, right? Book 1 could be a 2-parter. Book 8 could be a 2-parter, and then you have the 6 books in the middle. That's like a 10-episode run on Netflix or one of those streaming things. And I'm kind of writing it that way also. For example, book 1 was just all about introducing the characters, getting Sam to solve his first mystery, and this is where he meets Danny and falls for her. And then book 2, she's still out in Wyoming where they met, and he's back home. So she's not really in that book very much, but now we're meeting other characters, Sam's friends, things like that. We also meet Sam's coworker, Scott, introduced in book 2, has a few lines in book 2, has a few in book 3, nothing really important to the story. He's just part of the crew. But then in book 4, Sam, Linus, and Scott go to Vegas, and I have my prologue. I mean, I love this idea. I have my prologue opening with like Scott, who's originally from Vegas, but he's a little secretive about his background when he came to work with them, 4 or 5 years ago. And the prologue for book 4 is going to open with him kind of in a dingy underground room where there's poker going on. and something happens and it convinces him to leave Vegas. And I'm going to try to end the chapter with him like looking at help wanted jobs. And it has nothing to do with the actual mystery itself, except they're going back to Vegas for this book. And while he's out there, he's going to have to exercise some demons, and those demons are going to end up being the suspects in this book. So it kind of does kind of come back around and have to deal with it. So I'm really thinking of a TV show with like multiple characters that get their own plot, like Lost used to do. They get their own story, but at the same time, there's a murder mystery going on that Sam is trying to solve in each one of the books. So
I like that about the kind of the secret hidden life, but I am kind of disappointed that it's underground poker, because when he started that story, I thought, okay, he's going to be a pole dancer at a gay nightclub or something like that.
Well, I mean, I haven't finished plotting that book yet, so it could still change.
Yeah.
We'll see. Yeah. So, and then in book 5, I believe they're back in Savannah. Book 6, they're on vacation again. Sam's with Danny this time, and book 7 is a serial killer. So, like, I'm actually making references to the serial killer in some of the other books, and that's the one thing I love about plotting all these books at once, and still not even being finished with book 2, because when I decided that Scott was going to have this secret life in book 4, I wanted him to have a little bit of an injury in book 4 that when we meet him in book 2, he has an injury that Sam and Linus, the two coworkers, never really asked him about. And in the beginning of book 4, we're going to learn how he got that injury. And it's not really going to be brought up at all in books 2 and 3, other than when I describe Scott to the reader for the first time. And I just think it's fun. I think it's one of those little seeding things that, because I'm plotting so many books at once and I plan on writing all the first drafts right in a row, it does make it easy to kind of get all those items into the books where they need to be. And in fact, I have another thing that I want to go back and change in book 1 and then republish again, which I did 2 weeks ago. So I don't know. I'm kind of excited about this whole thing. It's a lot of fun.
It sounds like fun.
By the time I was finished Sunday night, I went to bed around midnight. I know I worked on it for a few hours in the evening, book 4. I'm going to say that I was just about done, which turns out to not be true, but I was just about done. I knew it needed one more look over, and then I would call it done and be on to chapter 5. So just keep that in mind, because that didn't actually happen. Monday, Martin Luther King Day. So I was off work. I got up early, showered, ready to go. When I left the house, it was 4 degrees. So, cold. I dropped Max off at my mom and dad's, and then I was off to Chick-fil-A. I was there for a while. I usually get there around 9:30 and leave around 11:30. This time I got there at like 9:45. I didn't leave till 2. I was really working hard on whatever chapter it was. On the way there, I listened to chapter 2 of Ninth House. Again, I needed to get the first 3 chapters finished by the end of the week, because of the homework that I had for Story Grid Guild included some of those 3 chapters. So I needed to get that finished. It's an interesting story. I don't dislike it. But it's not my genre. It's like a magic / horror / murder mystery. So 1 out of 3 ain't bad. I'm not much of a fan of like magic, like fantasy books with I just never could be interested in those. But that's what these are. So, and I'm working through it. There were 2 chapters, chapter 2 and 3. They were 25 minutes each. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes to get where I was going. So I listened to most of chapter 2 on the way there, and then the rest of chapter 2 and most of chapter 3 on the way home. And then when I got home, I listened to the rest of chapter 3.
Yeah, I'm thinking in the back of my head, I almost all the urban fantasy books I have read, they're almost all actually at their core mysteries. But they, like you say, they throw that magical realism stuff on top of it. And, you either like that or you don't. And it really depends on how well the author does it. But yeah.
Oh, we're going to talk about this author later on, believe me.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. I have so many questions about this writing style. And then I had just gotten to Chick-fil-A actually, and I sat down to start eating. And that's when you sent me a message and said, hey, you forgot to put the link to your 2024 daily writing spreadsheet in the show notes. And I thought, oh, damn it. So I came home, I fixed it, and I put the link into the 2 podcasts. So that was there. So they're there now in the old podcast, but if anyone's interested, but I'm going to post them again in this podcast for reasons I'll get to in a second. I did go. Okay. So when I got to Chick-fil-A, the first thing I did, this is why I was there for so long. I did go back through chapter 18 again. Like I said, the previous day, I was trying to watch football at the same time. Didn't really do a good job. And, went through it again. By the time I was done with it, I added 300 to 400 more words. And again, every time I add like 300 to 400 or 500 more words, I always like the chapter so much better. And it's all based on the fact that my ability to do description and emotion is just not very good the first time, and the second time I really have to work. It's like, clay that you have to mold when I write these things. So
right.
I did get home around, I don't know, 2:30, and I started on the story grid guild assignment for week 2. It was a series of videos and worksheets, and it was really a lot. The videos were long, so I really just kind of sat and watched the videos. I read through the worksheets, but I didn't actually start any of the homework. I just wanted to go through it. I also reread chapter 3. This time I read it instead of listening to it to make sure that I got everything, because that's the scene that we're focusing on in this story grid guild. And then later that night, me and my buddy Tim had our first week of the indoor golf simulator league for the spring, or for the winter, I guess. There's 10 weeks. We played pretty well. We had one blow up hole where we got an 8, and that killed our score. You should never get an 8 in a 2-man scramble. It means both people hit bad shots, and you had to use one of the bad shots, which just made it worse and worse and worse. So,
right.
But it was fun.
Drew Breed just opened a place called Surge Entertainment. Just, I could throw a rock and hit it from where I'm sitting here almost. And they have golf simulators in there. And I think I'm going to go try one of those out, because I've never been in a golf simulator.
Oh, they're so much fun. They're just so much fun. You just hit the ball as hard as you can. Don't worry about hitting anything with your club. They build it. That was Tim's problem, is he was afraid of, when he was swinging his long club, he was afraid he was going to hit the TVs behind him on the wall.
Oh,
and so he kept like short swinging, could not hit the ball with his driver at all, which kind of hurt our score a little bit. But about the 7th hole, I kind of watched and I was like, dude, you're like this far away as you're coming through back here. You're not going to hit anything. And he started hitting the ball better after that. So
well, I'm surprised they're that close. So you'd think they'd set him back a little bit.
Yeah. Well, this guy has 3 bays. They're pretty wide, but because you're standing in the middle, your club is back here.
Yeah, true.
Let's see. And then I got home from the indoor golf simulator league, had a bowl of cereal, watched football, and went to sleep. It was another fun, long day, but it was a fun day. A lot of fun stuff going on there. So. Let's see. Tuesday, I was up to work from home. I had 2 emails from my boss, which was nice. One was approving my vacation days. I put those in on Sunday morning, and the other one was approving me working from home Thursday, because I just didn't feel like going into the office at all. This past week, it was just snowy and yucky and cold every day, and I didn't really want to go anywhere. At lunch, I went to that 2024 daily writing spreadsheet, even though I'd fixed it the day before. And I realized that none of the formulas were working correctly. If you skipped a day and didn't write and just left the field blank, all the calculations went off. So I worked probably for about a half an hour fixing them all. I also added a place where you could input a starting number at the top. So if you've already started writing and you got like 10,000 words done, and then you want to start using the schedule from there, you put the 10,000 in, and then it keeps the running total for you, but it does all the calculations based on the schedule itself, which works out really well. So cool. Again, a lot of fun stuff in there. I put some new directions in there that show you how to use each field. So if you want to download it, it'll be in the show notes or in the YouTube video notes once I get this posted, and you can click it and save a copy of it and use it and change it and do whatever you want to it. I'm really excited to start using it in March. I kind of wish I was using it in February. I just want to keep editing this book though. Oh, let's see. After work, the snow hadn't started flying yet. It had stopped snowing, I think, on Monday, and was going to start again on Tuesday night. So I went to Hothead and worked on chapters 20 and 21, but I technically kind of combined them into one chapter. So I really did chapter 20. I think it needs a little more work, and I'll handle that in my next and final revision. I'm not going to, a lot of times when I finish a chapter, I just go through it and I look at it. If I see a sentence, I'm like, oh, that needs to be better, I'll change it. But if not, I'll actually make a note in the notes section on the right in Scrivener and say, add this next time. That'll be my final revision, the next one I go through.
All right.
On Wednesday, I woke up early and, so this is when I decided to start giving myself a little bit of time to write before I work. This is something I'm going to start doing in March. And I kind of took advantage of that about the fact that I wasn't going to work on Thursday. And I thought, well, I'll get up Wednesday. Maybe I'll get up Thursday also. I ended up finishing the first half of chapter 21 on Wednesday morning. I did it from 6 to about 7:10 maybe. And got through the chapter 21 is basically 2 scenes, and I did the first scene in there. And then I did go back and, I talked about this a few months ago. I did go back and resubscribe to YouTube Premium. Even when I'm watching it on my computer, the I use one of those ad blockers so
Mhm.
that it blocks the commercials on YouTube, which kind of goes against the fact that I'm trying to get subscribers to our YouTube so that we get paid from the commercials. I understand that. I'm a hypocrite. I get that. And YouTube's working really hard right now to get past those ad blocks. So a lot of times I would click on a video and I'd see like the end of the commercial with the timeline going to like 30 seconds. Then it would flash, and then the video would take a few seconds to start loading, and it would load already started. Like they're really working hard to get around these ad blockers, and the ad blockers are working just as hard to try to keep up with it. And I
Right.
just thought, you know what, I should be paying for this. I mean, it's kind of like back when I just first started doing software development, and I sold my first program, and immediately I quit downloading illegal music. It was like, the people put their heart into this, they worked. I should pay for it if I'm going to enjoy it. So I
Right.
kind of feel
Right.
the same way about YouTube. So I did go back. Don't worry though. I'm not going to, it is back on my TV also. YouTube is back on my TV, but don't worry. I'm not going to like go back to what I was doing where I was just watching YouTube for hours and hours, mostly because there's just not anything anymore to watch. I don't have all those React channels I used to watch. None of them do anything that's interesting anymore. So,
Right.
and I've got my BritBox. I've got a couple series I've started there, including Miss Marple. That now that all the Christmas movies are over on Hallmark, I can get back into watching that too. Let's see, what else did I do? Okay, so I don't know when this happened. I think this happened in the evening, but I realized that the midpoint I had created for this book and when I was plotting it, just wasn't working. I had Scott going undercover and disappearing. It was supposed to be like in this dingy basement, like a great environment for a book or a TV show. And I just had, okay, Sam's my POV character, so I'll send Scott down there, but the reader will actually get nothing that Scott does because he's not my POV character. Well, that's not going to work. So then I thought, well, I'll have Scott take Sam down there, and the 5 people around the table at Poke Game, they're going to be the suspects. This gives Sam a really good chance to interview them or just casually talk to them, and Scott can introduce him as his cousin who wants to play, whatever. I don't care how that works, but whatever gets him into the game. And then I realized, well, for the next 3 or 4 chapters now, is Sam going to avoid them? Because I want something to happen at the end of that midpoint that is exciting, and I didn't know what to do with it if Sam was going to have to be able to talk to them over the next 3 or 4 chapters. So killed that. I basically killed the whole thing. I realized that wouldn't work. So I really decided at that point I needed to spend a lot more time on the second half of book 4. Yeah, that didn't happen either, people. The book 4 is all blown up now. So Thursday.
That's something I've run into in the past as well, with a single POV in a book that, there's all this cool stuff going on, but if your character's not there, it doesn't really matter. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Let's see. So Thursday I worked from home instead of going to the office, and because I was working from home, I got up at 6 a.m. Showered, and I wrote until about 7:30. Worked on the second half of chapter 21. Got to the very end. There were about 6 sentences at the very end that I thought, this isn't a good way to end it. It's not exciting. I don't think I like it very much. But it was getting close to me having to start work, so I just put that aside. I figured I would work on that next time I wrote. So I made it most of the way through chapter 21 in this case. Okay, so at work, since I've started there, we have an 11:30 stand-up meeting that is now being changed to 1:30. This is every day. The department, we get into a meeting on Teams and we talk about all the projects we're working on, if we have any issues, if we need any help, and then everybody's kind of there to talk about it if we need to. It takes about 15 minutes, and it's been at 11:30 Eastern time every day. Well, I found out, like I said, that starting next Monday, starting 2 days from now, it's switching to 1:30, which is pretty cool because that means if I'm able to do a 90-minute lunch for my writing schedule, I'm going to try to do 11:30 to 1. I'm pretty sure I'll be able to do it. My coworker doesn't care. I asked him. I don't think the bosses are going to care. I'm going to ask them when I go in next week. But that will work out really well because that'll give me essentially 5 writing sessions per week, Saturday and Sunday, when I have nothing after, I don't have anything to go back to. I can stay as long as I want. What is it? Tuesday and Thursday when I'm in the office will be 90-minute lunches. And then Wednesday I'll get up at 6 and I won't have to start working until 8. I'm going to try to do 8 to 4:30 on that day. So that would give me another 90 minutes to write. So that means I'll have 5 writing sessions throughout the week, all of them at least 90 minutes, which means I should be able to get my word count in and follow my schedule pretty well as I'm writing these books.
Yeah, no, that sounds good.
In the evening, I grabbed my laptop to work some more on book 4. And what I had plotted so far was not really a murder mystery. It was kind of like a suspense thriller and I really want to write a murder mystery. So I deleted everything except for the prologue, the midpoint, and the climax because I love all of those. All three of them revolve around a poker game, and like George Lucas always said, the beginning and the end they have to rhyme. So I'm going to start it with a poker game and end it with a poker game with all the same people in both cases, which I really like. And I spent a couple hours reworking through the first half of it, and then I went to bed. Friday, worked from home, nothing writing related on Friday. Worked all day, and then didn't do much in the evening. And then after I don't know what time it was, maybe 6:30, I made my big bowl of potato soup that you saw on the Facebook page. Oh God, it's so good. That's probably the best thing I've ever made when I'm making like the Snapchat videos that I like to make. That's probably the best thing I've ever made. It's so good. And when we're done podcasting now, I'm going to have a bowl of it.
And I like the way you prominently featured the bacon in the dish, the big pile of bacon, because that'll get people every time. Yep.
I mean, as it should be. I mean, bacon should always be prominently. I remember Lindsay Baroker once tweeted something like, I'm out of bacon and I don't know what to do. And I replied and I was like, okay, my first question is, how could you run out of bacon? I was joking. And she answered me not realizing that I was joking because she doesn't know me. So why would she know that I was joking?
Yeah.
And then today I was up around probably about 7 o'clock, 7:15. At this point, other than taking my trash can out to the street on Thursday and then going back outside an hour later to retrieve it, I hadn't been outside since Tuesday night. And that's not an exaggeration. It was cold out and snowy, and I hate this weather. And so today I thought, okay, I have to go today. I have to go right today. So I showered and then went outside and I snow blowed my driveway and shoveled some of the sidewalk. I have one of those tiny, it looks like a weed whacker. It's a snow blower, and the snow blows straight ahead. So whichever way you're pushing it, that's the way the snow blows. Well, when I'm on my sidewalk, I don't want to blow snow into my neighbor's driveways, so I can only go so far with it. So I used it for most of the sidewalk, and then I used a shovel for the rest of it. Started my car, let it run, scraped it all off as best I could, and was on my way to Chick-fil-A. I finished chapter 21, which I had a few sentences left in it. And then instead of starting on chapter 20, it took me about an hour because I made a bunch of changes to some of the earlier parts of it also. And then instead of working on chapter 22, chapter 22 is the dinner party scene. This is a big one. It's like 3,500 words right now, and it needs to be longer. And so instead of doing that at Chick-fil-A when I knew I wouldn't get very far with it before I had to leave, I went back and I looked at some of the side notes for 19 and 20. And then based on some of the things I had put into 21, and I made all those edits. I got rid of all those side notes. And then I have a pretty important character in chapter 22, the dinner party scene, that she was mentioned once. She actually was in chapter 1 and then never heard from again. She wasn't mentioned, but she ends up being a pretty important character going forward. So I thought I need to mention her somewhere. She doesn't have to show up, but I need to mention her. So I went back and added her to 2 or 3 chapters where it made sense. And I got that taken care of. So I kind of started crossing things off the list of the first 21 chapters that I had in the sidebar, which, had to do anyway. So I'm happy that I was able to do that. I came home and finished my story grid guild homework for week 2 and marked my essay as completed. I'm hoping that so far through 2 weeks, all you do is you do the homework and then you mark it submitted. Nobody actually looks at the homework to make sure that you're doing it right. And in fact, in today's assignment, it says, oh yeah, you're just practicing this. And I'm like, well, how do I know that I'm practicing it correctly? That's what I need to know.
Right.
So I'm hoping that as we move more, and this is something that Tim Grohl said in November that got me into this, which was he was going to, in this semester, this new story grid, they were going to focus more on teaching you how to know whether you're doing it right or wrong. Right now, they're not doing that. But again, I'm only 2 weeks in. So hopefully with the next few weeks, we start learning how to tell whether you're actually doing it right or not. Because as far as I know, I'm doing it right, but maybe I'm not. I don't know.
So what are these essays that you're doing? Are you practicing certain techniques or what?
Yeah, today wasn't, so it's starting small. We're starting eventually, I think by the end of this first semester, by the end of June, we're going to have a scene written. That's it. You're just writing one scene. Right now, you're just learning how to identify all of the different things that should go into the scene, the genre, and what are the problems that the character should face based on the genre. What is the story grid word? The external genre and the internal genre. There's all those items. I think it's a lot of stuff that people who don't know story grid would look at and go, I don't need to know all that stuff to write. And maybe that's true. I don't know. It's not like you hear story grid mentioned ever at 20 books or Mark Dawson or Joanna Penn. You never hear them mentioned. So who knows if it's the right method or not. I just really like it. So that's why I'm doing it. So it's a lot of learning the the definitions and the terminology behind StoryGrid, and then you get into the actual writing of the scene. So that's where we're
Right.
at right now.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the story grid, and I've looked at it quite extensively over the last few years, uh, is making explicit to you what's normally implicit to an author. Things that you just know about story, and you know that it has to be in here. You don't really know why. You don't,
Right.
and so it's just making it explicit and trying to kind of codify in your brain how these things go together and how they work. And I guess partly because if it's not there and you think you've got some trouble, you're able to in the storyline, you're able to identify what the trouble is. So that's
Yeah, that's one of the big Sean Coyne things is he always says that you can hand your story to someone and they can read it and hand it back to you and say, yeah, this doesn't work. But then when you say why, they don't have an actual answer.
right.
And
Right.
with what StoryGrid is teaching you, it's to understand why it's not working so that you can fix it. So that's
Right.
kind of
Right.
where they're at with it.
Okay, so my weekend review. Last Sunday it was a day of church and football, and a little bit more planning for the coming year. I also finished the book that had started Productive Indie Author. I'm not sure I would necessarily recommend it for an established author. It kind of struck me by the time I got to the end as a bunch of blog posts that were put together. She did provide a lot of interesting tactics and strategy for dealing with resistance and life getting in the way of your writing time, which, given how little I wrote this past week relative to my goal, I'm going to have to try to implement some of those. Um,
Yeah.
uh, but basically, they all come down to what it always comes down to, which is you got to set your priorities. You got to decide that you're going to make this writing time important. And it doesn't matter what else comes up short of death or dismemberment, that you're going to go ahead and do it. And I guess I'm not quite at that stage yet. Um, for the newbie, though, and probably for me also, there was a bunch of interesting stuff on planning not only your day to day schedule, but also how to develop production schedules once you've settled into a writing groove. In fact, that's one of the things she emphasizes in this book, that you need to give yourself 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year, depending on how much you actually write, before you can be confident that you can produce so much in a given time period. And until you do that, you really can't develop a production schedule. Because it's going to become hit or miss, whether or not you can set a goal for yourself in terms of, I want 4 books this year or whatever. But unless you know how much you can write and how much time you have to write, you really have no way of knowing if you can actually meet that or not. So that's one of the things that I kind of liked about, I guess, the main message of the book. Give yourself time to figure out what is your speed and what is your production rate, and find one that works for you. Um, After that, I turned in early at halftime of the Lions game because we were winning, and I didn't need the disappointment of seeing them ultimately lose, which they almost did. My sister thought I was nuts, but I felt a lot better by just turning it off and getting away from the TV.
The number of times I've wanted to do that during a Browns game, like on a Monday Night Football, it's like I know what's going to happen. I might as well just go to bed. And then I stayed up. Like I admire what you did.
It was a little bit tough, but I was really tired, so I did it. Monday was the first day of implementing my new
Bluetooth
daily
disconnected.
schedule. I was up at 6 a.m. More probably because of insomnia more than anything else. And I got buckled into the desk around 8 a.m. I did a couple of 25-minute sprints to start, and I got about 1,543 words during that time. I put the wrong thing down here in the outline. It was for What the Cat Dragged In. I then went and did some more on What the Cat Dragged In a little bit later in the morning. Got lost in the process at this point because I kind of already written up to the point where I had outline. So I was writing, but I was writing outline for future chapters. When I looked up, it was nearly 11 o'clock. I'd spent 3 hours total, and I'd written like 3,919 words. I'm not sure where they came from and why they came out that fast, but the story is now expanded out to 43 chapters. I think that's going to be the maximum length of the story, unless I happen to get the really long chapter that I have to split up once I start actually writing on it. But that was really productive. I was really happy with that morning. I thought, man, the schedule is going to work. It's going to work really well. And then it didn't later in the week. Next on that schedule was to do some Facebook administration work and set up the day's promotion activities for Vela, which I did over about an hour. till about noon. And then Tammy and I went to the gym and then to Chick-fil-A for lunch, which is always good. We were back home around 2, and the next 2 hours I spent outside in the damp cold, getting the house and property ready for the deep freeze that we knew was coming. A bunch of the plants we had outdoors that we wanted to save, we had to move indoors, including this one tomato plant. We've got this one tomato plant that is about 4 foot tall. It's about 3 foot around, and it's never died. It just wouldn't die. It refuses to die. And it keeps producing tomatoes, these little cherry tomatoes that my wife loves. So we brought it indoors. It's sitting in our bedroom right now. We're going to keep it going and see if we can grow through this coming summer as well. I then broke out the bandsaw and worked on resawing some of the lumber that I harvested from my father-in-law's property a number of years ago. I'm going to make some planter boxes for this spring, and then also a new vanity top for our master bath. Dinner was not as good as your potato soup. We had ramen, cabbage, and meatballs. Ramen is one of our favorite meals when it's cold outside. And the meatballs I made were a combination of turkey and sausage and chorizo. So they were spicy, they were tasty, they were moist. I liked them a lot. Once I cleaned up the dishes and took the trash bins out to the curb, I settled into my lazy boy, did some more Vela promotion, and watched the evening football game until it was time for bed, which was about 10 o'clock. Hit the sack. Tuesday was going to be a challenge. I knew going into it because I had 2 3-hour blocks of writing scheduled. And as it turned out, I did none of it at all. When I woke up in the morning, the temperature was 19 degrees. I spent the better part of 3 hours outdoors taking care of the livestock, the chickens and the wild birds and stuff, getting them thawed water and food and stuff, trying to scrape the cars off because when it was still above freezing, it started to rain. And then as it was raining, and the temperature fell below freezing, it started to freeze. And of course, by the time it was 19, everything was hard as a rock. So the cars were covered with ice. And I had to try to scrape them out. Luckily, we didn't lose power. I was kind of afraid we were going to, but I don't think we got much more than maybe, 3/8. Well, maybe an eighth of an inch, maybe almost 3/16. It wasn't terrible as far as ice storms go, but it was just kind of right on the cusp there. I did manage after that to take an hour walk around the neighborhood at noon, where I took my first crack at trying to record a walking podcast that I mentioned. I tell you what, it's definitely a work in progress, and I doubt if I'm going to get anything usable until I've probably done it a half dozen times or more. And this first recording was really bad because I was freezing in it, and because of the cold, I was kind of huffing and puffing as I walked, probably because I was walking fast enough to try to keep myself warm. And it sounded like I was out of breath from running. Either that or else I had a really bad cardiovascular system, one or the other. But it was bad. So I came home, I kind of trashed that after I listened to it. Then I went into what was supposedly was a second writing session, but I didn't. And I have no idea what I did. I didn't record any words for that afternoon. I probably took a nap after being out in the cold most of the morning, but I'm not even really sure. After dinner, I did do some Vela promotion and Facebook administration, and then I read a bit more of Otama's In the Shelter book. Wednesday was a little bit better day on the writing front. I then again woke up to temperatures that were hovering around 20 degrees, but this time I was kind of ready for it and didn't take as long to do the livestock chores. And I sat down to write. I got 1,201 words, which isn't a ton, but I spent most of the time at the computer going back and editing some of the earlier episodes so that everything fit together well. Noon, again, saw Tammy and myself at the gym, came home, had lunch, and then I had to go out shopping for groceries and stuff in the afternoon, household stuff that we needed, and then came back and put together dinner, which was one of those clean out the refrigerator kind of frittatas that we have every now and then because we get too many eggs on a day-to-day basis to keep up with eating them. So they pile up. And then when they pile up enough, I just make a big cast iron skillet full of frittata and we'd eat off that for a while. In the evening, I just did more Vela stuff, not much. And I did fall down the YouTube surfing hole on that night. Thursday, I was a really good boy in the morning, and I kept my butt in the chair for almost 2.5 hours. I only got about 1,729 words, but again, I spent some time editing. Around noon, I went for another podcast walk, and the result was just as dreadful, only without the huffing and puffing this time. So I guess there was incremental improvement.
Yeah, baby steps.
Yeah, it's difficult to talk into a microphone as if you're talking to somebody when there's nobody there. It's
Yeah.
really strange. Like, here we're doing the video cast and we can see each other. So it's a little bit easier to look up. You see there's somebody there, they haven't nodded off or whatever. And you've got in front of you a basic outline of where you want to go and with what you're saying. You don't really have that when you're out walking around the neighborhood. I don't know if need to make myself little notes on a index card to take with me or what. I'm going to try to figure that out this coming week to see what I can do to improve.
I would say you're probably in a hurry and you should just slow down.
Yeah, that could be. I need to walk slower. After that, and when I had lunch, then I know I took a nap. I'm sure about that because I had somehow managed, probably just by sleeping on it wrong. When you get old, you sleep on your shoulders wrong, and then all kinds of bad stuff happens. I had pulled a muscle under my shoulder blade, which is still bothering me today. And it just bothered me on that day, Thursday, to even sit upright in the chair. So I just laid down and took a nap for, I think it lasted about 3 hours. Nevertheless, that evening or later in the afternoon, I managed to get a couple hours of Vela promotion and Facebook administration going. Before bed, I went back and restarted a book that I mentioned before the holidays that I had picked up at the local independent bookstore, Fortune Favors the Dead by Stephen Spotswood. I read a couple chapters before I left on Christmas vacation, took it with me, never cracked it open again. So I just restarted it because I couldn't remember what happened in those first couple of chapters. I don't think I mentioned about this book before, but one of the reasons I picked up is because it won the Nero Award. And the Nero Award is an award that commemorates the Nero Wolfe stories of Rex Stout, which were some of my favorite stories, mystery stories. Rex Stout wrote, I think, 33 or 34 of these novels featuring the Nero Wolfe detective. And the award is given annually at the best mystery writer banquet name that I've ever heard of. It's called the Black Orchid Banquet in New York.
Nice.
So yeah, it's just fantastic. I think over the next few years, I was kind of perusing before the podcast all the other Nero Award winners. I think I'm going to try to see if I can read all of those over the next few years. There's about 45 or 50 of them to date. They started this in the early 70s. Rex Stout died, I believe, in 1974 or something like that, and that's when they started this competition.
So these Nero Wolfe, they're old, right? They're from like the 40s, 50s.
Yeah, they're from kind of like the golden age of crime detective stories.
I think I've heard them on the what's the Sirius XM channel, XM. Oh man, Radio Classics channel. Was it a radio show at some point?
Probably so. Yeah, they were very, very popular. Mid-century.
Yeah. Okay. That's how I've heard of them. Okay, from the Radio Classics channel.
Friday, another day where my writing time got swallowed up by other things. I was up late for some reason. We both forgot to set our alarms, and when we do that, we'll just sleep in right till mid-morning. Killed most of what remained of the morning doing a puzzle and working on some Vela promotion and Facebook administration. Then managed to get to the gym. Then to Chick-fil-A for lunch again, second time that week, which is an unusual occurrence, but made me happy. I really wanted to go to New York Bagel, to be honest, but they're moving their location to closer to campus, which means it'll be about a mile further away from me than the 2 blocks where it is right now. But and I somehow picked the week that they decided to move, and it's actually a very strange week to move because classes have already started. But I guess it is what it is, and they couldn't do it any other time. So they're in transition right now for this week. I'm going to have to go check out their new location next week. The afternoon and early evening on Friday was devoted to gardening. Specifically, I had started some tomato and eggplant seedlings about 2 weeks ago. So I had to prick those out and put each little tiny seedling into its own pot because they'll have to stay in the house now for another 4 or 5 weeks, maybe 6 weeks before we are well clear of the cold weather and they can go out. The soil's warmed up enough. By the end of February, first part of March, it's time to put bedding plants out around here in on the Gulf Coast of Mexico, or the Gulf of Mexico coast. After that, did a little bit more Velo promotion and then read some of the spots with the book before bed. And then today, I actually kept my butt in the chair this morning for nearly 3 hours and added 311 words to what the cat dragged in. I then signed up for an almost free trial of Shopify. This is something I've been thinking about. Not that I'm anywhere near the point where I can put up a store for direct sales, but I hear so much about Shopify. I really wanted to get into it and kind of kick the tires, see what's in there, what's possible, how it works on the inside when you're creating a store. And what they have going on right now is an almost free trial. You can get the first 3 months for $1 each month. And then you can cancel it afterwards if you want to. So I thought I would get in there and over the next couple of months, just kind of poke around and see what's in there, see how things are set up and just how difficult it is to deal with. And now we're recording, and probably when we're done with this, I'll just have some dinner and read until bedtime.
So I will say that Caro actually did a bunch of videos for me on Shopify about
she did
2 years ago. Yeah, and they're inside WordPress, and she shows how to use it and how to set it up. I'll put the link into the show notes.
Okay.
If you want to check them out, if anybody wants to check them out, they're really good videos. They're really specific videos,
right.
And they're really good.
There's a Facebook group that I belong to I believe it's called Authors Selling Direct, and it's kind of nominally run, or the guru, and there is a woman from either New Zealand or Australia, I can't remember which. Her name is Morgana Best, and she's kind of the Shopify guru, has been the one that's been beating the drum for authors to do direct sales for years now. And she in that group, number one, she does courses and stuff on how to do these things, these things up in the kinds of minutia that you have to take care of when you're doing it. But secondly, she posts a lot of free information in that group about selling direct and using the various tools. So that was one. I think it must have shown up in my Facebook feed, that got me to thinking about it at this point in time, and I just went ahead and took a look at it. And yeah, so it looks interesting. I did create an account, and so we'll see what happens.
I don't know if you heard Paul Teague's last podcast a couple of weeks ago, but he said in his podcast the way he feels about that. It's the same way that I feel about that, which is I don't want to have to deal with customers. I don't want to have to deal with returns. I don't have to deal with any of that stuff. The minute that becomes something I have to deal with in my writing career, I'm not writing anymore, which I agree wholeheartedly with. Yeah.
Right. Well, there's two ways of looking at it. Number one is that way, that you don't want to deal with customers. The other way to look at it, and this is kind of the way the Author Selling Direct group approaches it, is that you're not dealing with customers. What you're dealing with are community members. And this is part of developing community with the people who are interested in your work and are willing to buy your work.
Right.
The delivery and stuff, I don't think is an issue. At least I've never heard anything about it inside that group, because all these like Shopify is tied. You can tie it to BookFunnel for delivery of the electronic stuff. You can tie it to whatever drop shipper you want to use for your printed work. A lot of them use Lulu because of the quality that Lulu produces. So yeah, a lot of that stuff is kind of at arm's length for you as an author. But yeah, I'm sure there is some high touch that you have to do. Yeah. And until you get into it, you don't really know how much that's going to be. So my week, I think my week was fairly good. Like I said, I graded on a C. The one thing I forgot to mention up front that I was really happy about is that every single day this week I exercised, and which probably led to those 2 long naps that I had during the week. But I had 3 days at the gym, 2 days with long walks. I didn't go out today because I got into the writing groove. On the schedule, it said go walk, but I was writing well and I just kept on doing it. But yeah, I was happy with that. So the week overall, I give myself a C. We're going to shoot for a B next week, and we'll see what happens.
Nice.
Okay, one thing I did do is I this week is just in prep for the podcast here is come up with a running list of future things to do. A lot of this relates to what we talked about when we were doing our 2024 preview. And as a result, the first 4 items on this list are finish, 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 and finish. And that's finish Death Comes to Paradise, finish What the Cat Dragged In. Those are my first 2 big priorities coming into the year. I also want to finish adding my backlist of short stories, kind of scrounging around my hard drives, trying to find them and bring them up into my short story compilation, Mistakes Were Made, that I have on Vela. I also want to finish sometime in this first quarter coming up soon, my Reams Stories subscription site. Again, it's a little bit early for me to be really having this, but I want to get that, at least the structure completely set up and ready to go for when I do decide to push this idea of subscriptions later in the year or perhaps in 2025. I also want to work through that Shopify tutorials, as I just mentioned, and decide whether it's something I'd like to use in the future or not. The other option, if you don't go Shopify, if you do want to sell direct, is doing something like WooCommerce. It's just I've heard and read that doing WooCommerce is fine. It's just that it's a little bit more technical. Shopify is set up for dummies to do. I want to continue also tweaking my weekly schedule to get it more realistic. It may well be that 20 plus hours of writing time is not realistic for me. I hope that's not true, but we'll see what evolves over the next couple of weeks. And then I also want to expand my 2024 goals into a writing and publishing plan for the next 5 years. I think what I've decided to do is just do a 5-year plan that kind of rolls forward. So add it once a year is done, add another year on the back end, and just kind of keep on moving it forward that way. So this list gives me something to shoot for, at least here in the first quarter as we get well into the year.
It'll be nice to adjust that as you go. Also, if you realize something is you're getting more or less than what you expected, you can make adjustments for that.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. All right. My running list of future things to do has 3 things on it. One of them is finish plotting my next 6 books. Again, book 3 is finished. I'm working on 4 right now. When I get to 5, one of the other items on my list here, when I get to 5, I think I want to do a kind of a live plot on either Patreon or YouTube or both, to get a video up there of how I'm going to plot chapter 5 in the middle of this series. So that'll probably be maybe an hour and a half video that I can do. And if you want to be part of that, Rich, we can do that one night together, or
okay,
I can do that whatever you want to do there. We can figure that out. And then I talked earlier about that Stanley Cup Facebook ad. Did we talk about that on the podcast, or was that before we started recording?
No. I think it was on the podcast. I'm not sure, actually.
Okay. Yeah, neither of us. Don't get old, people. So I created this Stanley Cup Facebook ad. I created a Stanley Cup Facebook post. Yeah, we did talk about that on the podcast. I think what I might want to do is turn that into an ad and run it for like 2 weeks just to see if I can get any. I feel like it's clever. So maybe I can get something out of it and see if I can get people to even comment on it. I can't imagine what the comments would be, whether they would be good or bad. I feel like there'd be a lot of people going, "That's not the right Stanley Cup."
Yeah, exactly.
I understand that, but so I think I might turn that into an ad and run it. I feel like it's about 14 and a half minutes into its 15 minutes, this Stanley Cup. So I better do it soon if I'm going to do it.
Now, technically, it's the Lord Stanley Cup, right?
Yes.
I believe. Yeah, you might be able to work that in there somehow, make it sound fancier.
I like that idea a lot, actually. I might do that. In terms of my addicted to, it started off the week being the vacation planning to go to Vegas, but as soon as I booked that, there was no more need to be addicted to that. It was ready to go. And then I've been back to binging this Essential Guide to Writing a Novel podcast as I continue to try to get caught up. I think he's got 96 episodes finished. I've listened to the last 5 or 6 new ones, and I'm about 20 to 25, maybe even 28 or 29 of the old ones. So I'm working to get caught up as I go.
Okay.
Have you listened to that yet?
No, I haven't. In fact, I completely forgot about it. I'll have to go back and check it out, because I did run into a new podcast, new to me this week. It's called the Fully Booked Podcast. I don't know if you've heard of it or not, but it's been going for a couple of years now. I think they're on episode 105 or something like that. Run by the guys behind Hidden Gems, which is a advertising site for ebooks and things. They also have other services as well. within the Hidden Gems umbrella. But what fell into my feed was an interview on the Fully Booked podcast with somebody called whose name is Kimbo York, uh, and they interviewed her on writing and marketing serials, which I found really, really interesting. And one of the other things that was interesting is, and kind of relating back to your running list of future things to do, and the question I had, well, you've got these 6 books that you want to do. Have you, and you're plotting your way through them. 3 is done. You're working on 4. Did you initially set up an overarching arc for those 6 books so you kind of know where everything is going already, or are you kind of just doing it much like a discovery writer would do and just plot one after the other and just see where they end up?
No, the overarching arc, if that's the right way to put it. Book 1, I introduced Sam's parents getting in a car accident like 10 years ago and thinking that it was a car accident, but then all of a sudden a lot of conspiracy theories are coming out about what really happened.
Okay.
So we talk about that in book 1 a little bit. It doesn't come up much in book 2, but as I'm plotting that, when I went in to do that plot for books 3 through 8, I told ChatGPT, I said, I fed it everything about book 1, everything about book 2, everything about all the characters I had. I mean, I wrote a, I don't know, 2 to 3 page Word document of everything that I knew about the book up to that point. And I said, I want book 8 to be the resolution of that arc.
Okay.
So, and then I told it I want to plant seeds as I go through the other books so that when we get to book 8, a lot of those seeds have been planted and we can go through all those items to finish that arc. So yeah, I did plan one, but I planned it back before I wrote book 1. I didn't realize at the time I was going to try to write books 3 through 8, a bunch of first drafts all in a row. So it just worked out okay. Worked out well for me.
Well, one of the things Kimbo did this podcast is she gave a link, a Google Docs link to a spreadsheet that she uses for planning out her serials, which I haven't taken an in-depth look at yet, but it looks pretty useful just from the short glance I took of it. She's coming at this from a serious serial perspective, where you're writing stories that may last for 1,000 episodes plus, like the One Piece story that it started off as a manga, transitioned to anime, and now they're doing books and everything else off of it. And she, one of the points she made during the interview was, you can write your way through a serial story. That's what she does. But if you've got no idea where it's going to end up on the other end, it's easy to get lost as you go, as you meander through the story, and all these side quests and things happen, and to wander so far off the main track that you really don't know how to get back onto it. So one of the things she proposes is that if you're not really a plotter, and you're going to have the storyline plotted out, at the very least, what you probably need to do is have some arcs for your character development, and because that will at least keep you grounded in that respect. And that's one of the things that her spreadsheet focuses on. So after we're done here, I'll go ahead and drop that link to you, and you can post that in the show notes. Some people may be interested in it.
I'm interested in it.
Yeah.
All right. Looking ahead to this coming week, tomorrow I will most likely wake up to the next assignment in the Story Grid Guild. That would be week number 3 that we're starting. And most likely I'll ignore it. I'm going to go to Panera first and try to work on chapter 22. Get started on 22. I don't know how long I'm going to be there. The first football game isn't until 3:00 tomorrow, but my laptop battery only has a couple hours, maybe 3 to 3.5 hours of battery life. So it's not like I can sit there all day. I'll try to get through chapter 22, but this is that dinner party scene that has 3,500 words that I want to expand to be even bigger. I feel like it needs more in terms of like the arguments. I mean, you think of a Perot where there's a dinner party scene, and that's usually a full segment between 2 commercials. It's not just one piece and then they cut to something else. So I think this is a big deal, a big scene. I almost want to make this the scene where my main character Sam realizes which way he should be looking, the direction he should be looking in the murder. So I want to put some clues in there or something in there that I'll have to add at some point. So this is a big scene to start editing tomorrow, and it's going to take me a couple days to do.
My laptop, which is a 2017 model, finally got to the point where it wouldn't work on the battery. You had to have it plugged in.
Oh, jeez.
So I finally bit the bullet and took it in and had the battery replaced. And it's probably the best $150 or whatever it was that I
I was
ever.
going to ask what that cost. That's
Yeah,
not bad.
150 to it wasn't no more than
Yeah.
200, and it went from 0 to now lasting 8-9 hours. So, it was great.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I've been in a constant battle between Windows laptop or Chromebook. Chromebook gets 8, 9, 10 hours.
Mhm.
Windows laptops do not, but I use Scrivener and I use Office 365, and you can't do that on
Right.
Chromebook. I wish you
Right.
could,
Right.
because I really like Chromebooks. But yeah, that's why I had to get this laptop's only a year and 3 months old, year and 2 months old.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, it's going down quick.
Hmm.
One of the things I do now when I go to a restaurant is I look for a table near a plug.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, at Hothead, the plug is like 8 feet up in the air because they have signs, and I'd be weird if I'm going to stand on a chair and start plugging my laptop. I don't think that's going to happen.
Really?
But, Monday, I am working from home. I don't know if I'll do anything writing related. Tuesday, working from home, and then I'll go to Hothead to write in the evening. Wednesday, the plan is to begin the 6:30 to 8 a.m. writing on this day. I know I did it last week, but it was kind of an impulse last week where I just woke up at 5:45 and decided to get up. I'm gonna actually set my alarm and for 6, get up, shower, get the dog fed and outside, and then I'll come back in and I'll work until about 8 o'clock to do some writing, and then I work from home all day. And then around 5:40, I think about 5 o'clock, my buddy Tim will come and pick me up, and we'll go to our next indoor simulator league. We have a 5:40 appointment for that. That'll be a nice long day. Thursday, I'm back in the office again. I want to try to start my 90-minute lunch on this day for the days that I'm in the office. So I'll be in the office one day next week, and then potentially 2 days the following week. And then we start 2-day schedule the week after that. So I'll try to do 90-minute lunches when I'm in there. Again, I don't think it's going to be a problem. I just want to clear it with a couple of people who may want to know where I am between 11:30 and
Right.
12. And it's really just 2 people that I can think of. So that should not be, and I don't think either of them will care. So that shouldn't be a problem. Friday, I'm working from home. I don't know about writing or editing. No plans there. Weekend comes next. And Saturday, I'll go to Chick-fil-A in the morning. I'll do some writing after. I'll run some errands and we'll podcast. In terms of my goal, let's see, I'm on 20. I think my goal is going to be easy this week. I'm just going to get through chapter 22, get through this dinner party scene, come out the other side with me really happy, regardless of the word count. I don't want to break it up into 2 chapters, but if it gets to like 5,000-6,000 words, I may. I'm not sure.
Right.
But I just let's get through this scene because this is a big one.
Yeah, sounds good. My coming week, tomorrow, like normal, is for church, and do some football. We'll get to see just how real the Lions are later that evening. Maybe I get some velo work done, shoehorned in between the games, but kind of like you, when I try to work during football games and do both, it usually ends up I can't follow exactly what's going on in the game, and I don't really do a good job on whatever else I'm working on. So I'll probably pick one or the other. Probably pick the games until halftime for the Lions.
Yeah, for me, the writing is what suffers. The games I can stamp with no problem. For me, it's the writing that really suffers.
Yeah. For the rest of the week, I'm going to work on getting closer to my goal of keeping my butt in this chair for 20 plus hours of writing during the week. And the only day I really don't have total control over, so if I don't make 20 hours, it's going to be my own fault, is Tuesday, which for us is dentist day. And my wife, Tammy, has a quilt meeting that I need to drive her to and pick her up from. So I may actually just stay out there at a coffee shop nearby and do a little bit of writing while I'm out there. So that day's schedule is not going to be a standard day as I'm trying to develop. But I'll try to work around things. In fact, going forward, I'm going to have to plan on setting up a weekly schedule every Sunday that takes into account these appointments and things that we have to do, and just build that off my weekly template that I have. Yeah, and that's it in terms of my week. It's just going to be, trying to stick to the schedule, basically. In terms of stuff to share, I did run into a few things I thought were interesting that people might want to check out. As everybody who has a ChatGPT account probably knows by now, they've opened up a GPT store there where people put on their own GPTs that others can use. They call it a store. They don't charge for anything. I don't know if in the future they plan on charging for it or not. But one of the GPTs that's up there is called Book Cover Illustrator. And it's kind of a fun thing to play around with. Basically, what you do is you kind of announce your presence to the GPT that, hey, I'm an author writing a mystery story, and I'd like to have an illustration. You don't want to tell it you want a book cover. If you tell you want a book cover, it's going to give you something that shows a picture of a book with your cover on it, and that's not what you want. So you want to tell it you want an illustration, and then you tell it, ask me what questions you need answers for in order to do this, and it'll ask you a series of questions to kind of narrow down on what the story's about, who the characters are, what's the setting, what's the mood, all that kind of thing. And then it creates a decent book cover or decent book illustration that you might or might not want to use as a cover. It's using Dolly through ChatGPT. So yeah, that's kind of something you might want to check out if you happen to find yourself roaming around the OpenAI website at some point. The other thing I want to point out for those who know about Mark McGinnis and his 21st Century Creative podcast, he's been on kind of a hiatus for the last year or so because he started a new podcast that he got funding from the equivalent of the United Kingdom's Council for the Arts. I'm not sure exactly what they call it over there. He's been doing a poetry podcast because he is a poet, and called A Mouthful of Air, which is a really good podcast. I listen to it every now and then. But he's now restarted his 21st Century Creative podcast, and it's now on YouTube. And I've got the link here, Jerry. You can drop it in the show notes. Mark's a really interesting guy. He has a lot of interesting insights. You can tell he's not a genre writer just by the way he talks and the kind of things he talks about. But it's interesting because he does on this 21st Century Creative podcast of his talk to all different kinds of creatives. So basically artists of any type and stripe. And you get, it's an interesting look into the life of the creative. And then the last thing I want to mention is Shel Honecker of the Indie Author Magazine wrote an article that called The Art of Amazon Attribution, and talking about attribution links, where if you use them, you can kind of track who's coming and buying stuff or hopefully buying stuff off your Amazon page. And in this article, she goes through step by step in minute detail what these links are, how they work, and how you can set one up for your store. So if the link is here, Jerry, I'll drop it in the show notes. And if you're interested in Amazon attribution links and you've either tried it and couldn't figure out how they worked, or you haven't tried it yet, this is a good article to look at.
All right. I have a couple things to share. One of them not on the outline that I'm just going to send you a link right now in our messenger here in our chat. And I want you to click on that link and tell me what you think. This is something that I bought back in late December with the idea of using once I start going to my schedule for writing. And I'm actually going to start using it this week. It's by a company called Scribbles That Matter. It's a weekly to-do list planner where you can put in daily what you're doing during the week, some goals, some weekend stuff. And the thing I liked about it is on Monday, I put a Post-it note on my desk and I marked down all the things that I want to try to remember to do. And then I add things and I cross things off as I do them throughout the week or as I think of new things to do. And I like this because I can put in there my projected word count each day and carry this around with me. So I don't know if this matters to you at all in terms of you saying you want to try to create better weekly schedules, but I do plan on using this going forward. Actually, starting Monday, I plan on using this. So
actually, yeah, I like the layout of this for a couple of reasons. One, because it allows you to both set weekly priorities and track what habits that you're trying to develop. But I like essentially the way they've laid out the to-do list for each day on the bottom. So this is it's not in any sense a traditional kind of calendar that you would get for scheduling or planning. But yeah, it looks quite interesting. It'd be interesting to see how it works for you.
Yeah, I'll put we're gonna have a lot of links shared this time with a lot of stuff going on here. So I'll put a link to this in the show notes also. You guys can check it out. Again, it's Scribbles That Matter Weekly To-Do List Planner 2024 on Amazon. I'm sure this is another one of those Instagram things that I saw that
could be.
I went looking for. So all right, I'm gonna rant here. Okay, this is all about my biggest frustration in writing, and it's also my biggest weakness. I talked about it a little bit earlier. It has to do with writing description. And I just want you to bear with me as I get through this ramble. I tried to put these bullet points in order so it made sense as I go here, and then I want to get your opinion at the end. So
Okay.
I've been listening to Ninth House. We know that, and because of the way that I read when before I started writing, I would just read books and I would skip the small words. I would skim a lot of the paragraphs. If there was a super long paragraph full of description, I would literally just skim it. Sometimes I would just stop and go past it because I was bored. Maybe look for a couple of big words here and there. And then like maybe 3 paragraphs later, something would happen. I have to go back and reread it sometimes, but most of the time I would literally just skim it or skip it. But once I started writing and kind of watching all these different YouTube videos on training and watching all the training videos that are out there and reading books on how to write and all these different things you do, or at least I did when I started to write. I now read differently. And now not only that, not only am I reading differently, but I'm listening to the books. I'm doing Audible now, and you can't skip or skim words. You're listening to every word. And this takes me back to Ninth House. She writes with a lot of description, sometimes tons of sentences. She'll put flashbacks in the middle of paragraphs that are like 1 or 2 sentences long. I remember so many videos have said when you do a flashback, you interrupt the forward momentum of the story for the flashback. So people will say try to limit those. The description, I mean, she's using like and as so much. And let me just say that this was a book that Stephen King called the best fantasy book I've read in years. Like, this book is huge. It's currently, I believe, 4,000 and I don't know, 4,300 in the overall Kindle store. My book is 2 million in the overall Kindle store. So like all those rules that people keep saying, and I think I've complained about this in the podcast before, all these rules that I hear, filter words and deep POV is a big one where I wrote my first murder mystery, and super editor C said to me, she said, you need that deep POV. And she would give me examples where it was like, Sam thought this, and Sam read this, and Sam saw this. And those are all those filter words that everybody says to take out. So then I rewrote that book and sent it to her. She said, this is so much better. Like, I don't know what the proper way to write is. And I'm pretty sure there is no proper way to write, but don't use adverbs is all over the place. But then I read this book and there's adverbs all over the place. You know what I mean? I don't really know. I don't know what the proper way is right now. So when I write, I'm not struggling to get a paragraph finished, but as I'm writing a sentence, there is this little thing in my head that says, this isn't what the rules say, but this does sound a lot better to put this in here. So I don't know what to do. Do you have any advice or anything you can speak on when it comes to like, what do you do?
Okay, yeah, I'll tell you what I do here in a second. First, I want to ask a question about this Ninth House. What's the POV in this?
They basically flip back and forth between the young college student, and I believe the other guy's a college student too, but he's like her mentor.
Is this like third person or first person?
It is third person. Oh, you know what? I believe it's first person, but I don't, off the top of my head now, I can't even remember.
Okay. Well, here's what I do when I'm writing, because I write the 2 stories I'm writing right now, in the middle of writing right now. Death Comes to Paradise is third person POV, and What the Cat Dragged In is first person POV. Those are very different. And what I try to do when I'm writing is I try to put myself very clearly into the mind of the person telling the story and how it's being told. So, like with What the Cat Dragged In, I'm very much Amelia Jones, and I'm telling this story first person to a friend of mine. And as a result, you naturally get all those kinds of flashbacks and stuff that happen because you're relating a story to somebody, and when something occurs to you about this story, you can just blurt it out, or you can just think it. Is it? And it's not. I don't think it's technically a flashback. It's a memory that's entering into the stream of the story. So that's for the first person stories. For the third person stories, it's a little bit more difficult to do that because you're basically telling a story about somebody else, and you don't really have that kind of very close connection with what happened in the past. There, if you put something like that in there, it is very, very much a flashback, and you're forcing the reader out of the stream of what's going on and telling them, okay, we're going to go back to something that happened earlier. So I try not to do any kind of flashbacks when I'm doing
I just looked,
third person.
and Ninth House is third person in the two POVs that they flip back and forth between.
Okay. Yeah, I try not to do flashbacks in that case. Or if I do, then they are flashbacks that either are completely set apart by scene breaks, or they're complete chapters on their own. Now, in terms of these other things that you're talking about, the adverbs and
Filter words.
filter words and stuff like that. Filter, yeah, I adverbs and stuff I don't worry about as I am writing. I then go back and when you put your writing through any of the grammar correctors, it will highlight all these adverbs. And then what I do is I go back, I go and I look at them and I say, okay, is it really needed, or is it just because of the way I was writing stream of consciousness? If it doesn't really add anything, I take it out. If I think it adds something, I leave it, because the rule no adverbs. Number one, it's been exaggerated. Stephen King kind of exaggerated that in his memoir, and people just kind of picked up on that because, hey, it's Stephen King. But you can't pick up a book, any book, even Stephen King's books, and not find adverbs in it. So that's kind of a dumb rule, because sometimes the appropriate verb to use is not strong enough.
Right.
You could go find a strong verb, but it might not be appropriate given the situation that you're writing about. So I don't worry about that too much. When I'm writing first draft, they're all in there, and then I go back after the fact and have to make the decision: are these things really necessary? I don't think readers in general even notice that they're there.
I don't either.
Yeah,
I don't think readers care.
No, I don't think they care, and I think they're used to thinking and talking like that. With filter words, there's a little bit different. I think a little bit different there, because I do try to avoid those. I especially try to avoid words that I personally have a hard time with. Things like that and it and if and stuff like weird stuff. So yeah, that's all I've got on that.
But that, and then you said, as I was going to say, so is another one that Lindy absolutely hates. So she can goes out. That is another one. Keep that out of the sentence, and the sentence still makes sense. I take it out. I mean, it was funny. I was writing this out list. I was putting my notes down in this outline on Wednesday night, when I was setting up what I did on Wednesday night. And then on Thursday, I was kind of binging the Essential Guide to Writing a Novel while I was working. One of the episodes is, each episode is about a half an hour. One of the episodes was all about deep point of view and how you should not have it, according to him in your book. And it's another one of these successful, traditionally published authors who are actually even just indie. I guess it doesn't matter if you're traditional or indie. Successful authors, he's got 13 or 14 books out, who come on to YouTube and say, this is how you should write. And then every book I read that's popular doesn't follow that, and yet it's still popular. And it always, I think I hear it more now because it annoys me. I'll hear an adverb, he lifted the box carefully, and I'll hear that and go, what was that? And who cares? It was there. So what? So I've decided, and this is why I added about 2,000 words this week to this book, is because I went really hard on the deep POV, and I made notes in earlier chapters to do it other places. And I think I'm just throwing all the rules out the window. I don't care anymore. I don't care. I'm not going to try to, every word that I put down as I'm typing, I'm not going to think about it. I'm just going to write it. And when I edit it, if I edit it and want to leave it in, I'm going to leave it in. I don't care.
Right.
Because if the story's good, that's what the readers care about the most.
Right. And if it flows well, that's what they care about.
Yeah.
In fact, last week I mentioned how I was going back on the very first episode of What the Cat Dragged In, kind of redoing it, going through, putting a lot of stuff back in that I had taken out. And that a lot of that kind of stuff is what I had taken out. A lot of the, the adverbs and kind of the surrounding, I don't even know what to call it, but just the surrounding description of not only action, but of the setting of things, putting it back in, making it less sparse, because I think I'd made it too sparse. It became almost too much like Hemingway's writing, which is fine for the kind of writing and the kind of era that Hemingway wrote in, and the kind of stories that he wrote. I don't think it was fine for the mystery that I'm writing. And I think that's kind of, ultimately, that's where the decision comes down to. You have to ask yourself, what's going to serve my story? And I'm going to leave it in It doesn't matter what the rules are. In fact, nowadays, if I'm listening to a podcast or something, or reading an article, and people even use the word rule or this is the way it should be done, I just turn it off, or I stop reading, because there is no one size fits all.
Well, what's funny is I purposely took I knew on New Year's Eve, December 31st, that on January, I don't know what day it was. Let's just say it was the 12th, maybe the 11th. I knew I was going to read that chapter to my writers club, because I went through and added a bunch of deep POV and a lot of description of one of the characters. And I really liked it. I read it out loud to myself that night while I was sitting there. And I immediately said, this is what I'm reading to writers club in 2 weeks. And I read it. They loved it. Like, they were said, this is really good. We love what you did with this character. And so like every time I do it, it seems to sound better to me when I read it out loud. Now you can go overboard with it. I think reading out loud for me will be the test. When I read it out loud, if it's too much, then I'll know to kill it. But I'm, again, no rules anymore, other than like, there are certain things I won't do. Like, I'm still going to kill the word just whenever I can, and that whenever I can.
Right.
But those are easy.
Sure.
But all this other stuff, I'm going to write, and we'll just see what happens.
Right. And this is one of the reasons why I know a lot of people, for example, a famous example, Joanna Penn famously does not read fiction. She reads nonfiction, listens to nonfiction, does not read fiction. I continue to read fiction even as I'm writing, even as I'm in the process of writing a story, because I want in my head this a sense of how are people writing, what is in fiction as opposed to nonfiction. Nonfiction is very different. And I spent 30 years of my career writing nonfiction. And if I took the lessons I learned there and how to be efficient and how to get essentially a story across, a nonfiction story, it would not fit at all writing a mystery, or it would not fit at all if I was writing urban fantasy or anything else. It's a very different way of writing. So that's one of the reasons why I continue to read and try to force myself to read when I could actually be doing something actual writing or doing something writing related.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, that's all I wanted to talk about today. I just need to get that off my chest, and I'll probably complain about it again in 3 months. But it just, some of that stuff is just, it's so strange to me. Anyway, all right.
It'll be interesting to see if these quote unquote rules that you're talking about here come up with in this story grid course that you're taking. Story grid has got its whole other set of rules that it deals with, but these kind of things that are kind of bugging you right now, I don't know if they'll come up or not, but it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. All right. That is the end of the podcast for this week. Do you have anything else you want to share?
No, I think I'm tapped out.
I actually had one last thing that I forgot to mention. That I got an email from Living Writer. I think it was like 2 days ago, saying that they've added some of the new features that they talked about. I went in yesterday. Last night I went in and I opened up the Living Writer, and there's a new chat feature where you can open up the chat and you can say, do you want this chat to have to do with the manuscript, full manuscript, or just the chapter that you're in? And one of the problems that I had with it a couple weeks ago was that you'd ask it for a summary of a chapter and it wouldn't know what that was. It would just give you a summary of a bunch of words, and you get pieces from one chapter and pieces from another chapter. I haven't gone in and tried this yet. And in fact, my subscription expires tomorrow, and I was thinking about going in and re-upping for another month, but I think I'm just going to concentrate on getting book 2 edited and then get books 3 through 8 done. And then maybe once I get through this year, depending on where I'm at, maybe I go in and, I'll keep an eye on their YouTube channel. I'll keep an eye on their emails. And if a year from now, everything's going great with what they set up with their AI inside their app, maybe then I'll take another look at it. But for now, I'm just going to kind of put it aside.
Yeah, one of the neat features of Novel Crafter that I really like is that whenever you do want to use chat there's a button where you explicitly tell it what the context is for whatever you're asking the chat to do. Is it the outline for this scene or this chapter? Is it the outline for the entire manuscript? Is it the entire manuscript? So there's a lot of different ways in which you can use chat and get it to focus in on what you want it to focus in on.
Yeah.
There.
All right. Maybe you'll have to do a Novel Crafter demo one of these days, because I kind of want to see it a little bit more.
Well, there's the Nerdy Novelist does a really good ones out there, and that's probably if people want to take a look at them, that's the best place to go.
All right, everyone, that is all we have for this week. If you want to get in touch with me, you can email me, jerry@jerryevanoff.com. Yeah, you can. The website is jerryevanoff.com. I'm on Facebook, facebook.com/jerryevanoff-author. Seriously, if you want to go see a really cool potato soup recipe and see it in action being made, go to my Facebook author page and give it a like or a follow, and you'll see.
Lots of bacon.
Soup. Lots of bacon. Holy cow. The recipe called for 12 slices. I put in 16, and I agreed with you when you commented and said that wasn't enough. So. YouTube.com/@the-new-author-podcast is where we reside. If you want to see our faces, you can go ahead and check us out there. If you do like it, give us a subscribe on that one. I like watching those numbers go up. And then let's see. And then patreon.com/new-author-podcast. If you want to go out there, become a fan of ours, help us out a little bit, follow us. There's a $5 tier, there's a $1 tier, and there's a free tier where you can just go sign up and be a fan. We would appreciate that.
Yeah, if you want to talk with me, my email address is rich@richkacy.com. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, and Blue Sky at Kacy himself. Check out Blue Sky if you haven't already. I think it is still in beta, which means you would need an invite. But if you send me an email, I have invites to give if you're interested in checking it out. And also you can look at my Vela stories if you have the inclination. All the links to them are on my website. The website is www.richkacy.com.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening, and we will talk to you all next week.
Have a great week, people.